High school dropouts should follow the orders of the new grad.
Thomas Hanks, the elite manager of the manufacturing department, told me this with a sneer. David Cross, the new grad, looked terrified as he glanced at both Thomas and me. I smiled at David to reassure him.
You seem pretty confident. Do you really think that, as a high school dropout hired by this big company, you can stand shoulder to shoulder with elites like us? You should know your place.
Unhappy with my attitude, Thomas's tone became even more condescending. Thomas, who laughed at me for not responding, walked over to David, clearly in a good mood.
Hey, new grad, make sure to properly supervise your high school dropout subordinate.
As Thomas patted David's shoulder, I decided it was time to reveal the truth. Huh? Subordinate? I was hired as an executive, actually. For once, the usually confident Thomas was left staring at me in shock. My name is Fred Walker, a 40-year-old guy who loves to draw. Since I'm not great with people, I've spent my days quietly assembling products in the factory. I grew up poor and only finished high school. I never really liked studying and preferred drawing and assembling things, so I don't regret not going to college. I worked in a factory to support my family and lived a carefree life, treating my mom to a modest feast whenever I saved up some money. But one day, my life changed drastically. As a result, thanks to a recommendation from someone who had known me for a long time, I switched jobs 3 months ago to a major toy manufacturer and started working there. I was immediately assigned to the manufacturing department, where I was tasked with making and assembling toys. I'm still not great with people, but since the job was familiar, I felt more at ease and gradually started to get along with the other employees. My real problem was with someone else. That someone was Thomas Hanks, the manager of the manufacturing department. During the first day introduction, Thomas stared at my face and name, then burst into laughter when he recognized me.
Long time no see, Fred. So, you're still alive. I heard you started working without even taking the college entrance exam, and I was worried about you.
Laughing and slapping me on the shoulder, Thomas was actually a high school classmate. He always had a habit of flaunting his superiority and looking down on others. Remembering how he used to mock me for being average in both academics and sports, I felt a bitter taste in my mouth. Yeah, long time no see. Looking forward to working with you.
I'm your boss, so show some respect. This is why it's tough dealing with high school dropouts who lack basic manners.
I'm sorry. I look forward to working with you. As I apologize, Thomas gave me the same mocking laugh he always had. Toy manufacturing is quite profound. Our company has recently been focusing on producing educational toys for children. The manufacturing department plays a crucial role, from planning and designing to creating blueprints and actually making and assembling the parts. It also involves repetitive, tedious tasks like conducting detailed inspections to ensure the products work as intended. If there's any defect, we must have thorough discussions with the design and planning teams to make necessary corrections. Normally, the department manager, Thomas, should lead such important tasks, but for some reason, he was pushing these responsibilities onto David, the new grad. David graduated from a prestigious university and joined this company a couple of months before I did. He's a diligent young man, but he's not very skilled with his hands and struggles with detailed tasks. One day, seeing David disheartened after repeated inspection failures, I decided to help him. It's probably because these parts aren't compatible. We should change the materials. If we need to revisit the design, we'll have to discuss it.
Fred, you understand this better than I do, even though you just joined. That's impressive.
David's face lit up as he said this, and he started bombarding me with questions about other concerns. In my previous job, I rarely interacted with other employees, so being praised so straightforwardly made me feel a bit uneasy.
Thank you, Fred. Thanks to you, I've learned a lot.
Feel free to ask me anytime.
That's great. I have a dream of delivering toys I've designed to children. I'm studying hard to achieve that. And I'm planning to enter the company's internal contest in 3 months.
In 3 months, there's a company-wide design contest open to all departments. If you get the manager's approval, your design can be evaluated directly by the company's executives, including the president, making it a unique and exciting opportunity. I've heard that many young employees with dreams, like David, enter this highly anticipated contest. That's awesome. You should definitely go for it, I said, and he smiled happily, but his expression quickly darkened.
What are you chatting about, David? Can't you do your job just because some high school dropout is bothering you?
It was Thomas, entering the inspection room with a sour expression. Thomas looked displeased as he watched me and David together. I had sensed for a while that Thomas was jealous of David, who was clearly talented, and was treating him poorly. I couldn't help but speak out forcefully to Thomas. With all due respect, isn't this job something you, as the manager, should be responsible for? David is doing a great job. Thomas flinched for a moment at my sudden defiance but quickly retorted.
What? I'm busy, and I'm giving this task to help train the new grad. Don't get cocky, dropout. David, hurry up and prepare the report for me.
Angry at my words, Thomas stormed out of the inspection room. Despite being the manufacturing supervisor, Thomas spent more time on the phone in his office or visiting other offices than on the shop floor. The staff seemed accustomed to his behavior, and no complaints were ever raised. It seemed they wanted to avoid being targeted by Thomas. From that incident onward, I clearly upset Thomas. He started watching my every move, ready to yell at me for any mistake in front of everyone.
You can't even do this right? You drop out. Don't think you can criticize my methods.
Being monitored and yelled at daily was wearing down my spirit. Seeing my disheartened expression, my colleagues looked at me sympathetically, but none dared to stop Thomas's tyranny. Thomas's treatment of me remained terrible. As he intensified his scrutiny, I was increasingly treated as an outcast by the other employees, and my assigned tasks dwindled, forcing me to find work on my own. While I was organizing the manufacturing area, Thomas came rushing over, looking flustered.
What do you think you're doing?
I was organizing to make it easier to count inventory. Is there a problem?
I'm the one responsible for checking inventory to order materials. Your unauthorized organizing has made the count confusing.
Sorting scrap wood and metal into discardable and reusable piles, I was yelled at by Thomas, who accused me loudly. While I believe that inventory management should prioritize safety and usability, I decided to keep quiet and offer a token apology to Thomas, who was fuming.
If you're so keen on cleaning, why don't you tidy up my desk? Given your basic education, you probably can't even tell what the documents are.
Furious, Thomas assigned me to clean his office, clearly to keep me from doing anything unnecessary. Despite the heavy atmosphere, David continued honing his skills for the company contest. He frequently sought my advice and eventually completed his ideal design.
Thanks to you, Fred. I was able to create my dream toy. Thank you so much.
Don't celebrate yet. You still need to submit this to Thomas and get his approval.
Oh, right. I'll go right now, just before lunch.
David's design overflowed with his love for toys, and you could almost see the smiles on children's faces who would play with it. While it might take time for it to become a product, I felt David's dream was not far off. David, who was enthusiastic in the morning, appeared visibly dejected afterward. How did it go? didn't you show your design to the manager?
Fred.
David, on the verge of tears, confessed that Thomas had harshly criticized his design.
He said I shouldn't get ahead of myself, entering a design contest when I can't even handle my regular tasks.
Watching David, who had worked so hard, slump back to the inspection tasks pained me. A few weeks later, the results of the first round of the company contest were announced in the company bulletin. I was genuinely surprised when I saw it and rushed to find David after visiting a certain place. David was in the locker room, not even changing, just staring quietly at the company bulletin. "David, what on earth is going on here?" David stiffened when he noticed me, out of breath.
Fred, I have no idea what's going on either.
He looked down at the company bulletin. Under the list of those who passed the first round of the company contest was Thomas's name, with the exact design David had painstakingly created. Thomas not only rejected David's design but submitted it as his own in the contest. Seeing David so dejected made my blood boil. "We need to confront Thomas about this." David nodded weakly, and we quickly changed and headed straight to Thomas's office. When we burst into his office, Thomas smirked.
What's with the two of you? Work starts soon. Get to your stations.
"Thomas, this is clearly wrong. The design that passed the first round is exactly David's work." Even though I confronted him, Thomas maintained his smug expression, looking at us with a sneer.
What are you talking about? It's just a coincidence that my design ended up looking similar to David's. Did you come here to waste my time with such nonsense?
While designs can occasionally look alike, this particular one could only have been created with David's ideas and the cooperation of others. As Thomas waved us off dismissively, I pressed further. "I've known David's design from the start. There's no way this refined design could coincidentally resemble yours."
Coincidence. Right, David?
Ignoring me, Thomas addressed David, who was too bewildered to respond. I glared at Thomas, but he remained unfazed. Then, as if he had a bright idea, he continued in an exaggerated tone.
"Yeah, let's have Fred work under David. This guy's just a high school dropout with no proper education. David, you teach him everything. Dropouts should follow the orders of new grad."
With a sneer, Thomas told me this. David, not understanding Thomas's impromptu decision, shook his head in confusion, his legs trembling.
"What's the matter? You can't follow my orders?"
Finding Thomas's ignorance amusing, I couldn't help but let out a mischievous grin. Noticing my unusual reaction, David looked at me in surprise.
"You seem pretty confident. Do you really think that, as a high school dropout hired by this big company, you can stand shoulder to shoulder with elites like us? Know your place."
Thomas's tone grew even more condescending, as if he wanted to express his disapproval of my attitude. But it's Thomas who should know his place. To encourage the confused David, I patted his shoulder firmly and decided it was time to reveal the truth to Thomas.
"Hey, new grad, make sure to properly supervise your high school dropout subordinate."
Thomas, who had somehow ended up in front of us, gripped David's shoulder tightly as he said this. For David's sake, I decided to play my best card right then and there. "Huh? Subordinate? I was hired as an executive, actually."
What? What are you talking about?"
For once, the always confident Thomas was left staring at me in shock. David was also staring at me in disbelief. "Oh, didn't you know, Thomas? I was hired by this company as an executive. I asked the president to start on the shop floor to understand the operations, but I'm scheduled to move to another department next month."
"No way. You were too poor to even go to college." There's no way someone like you could be hired as an executive at such a big company.
Thomas, shocked and flustered, seemed to be trying to convince himself of his own words. Sure, I was poor and gave up on taking the college entrance exam. Like you said, I started working in a factory right after high school to support my family. Thomas nodded vigorously, as if to say, I knew it. Back then, high school graduates earned less than others, and I was constantly scolded for my slow learning. My mother felt guilty for not being able to send me to college and often expressed her regret to others. To ease her worries, I worked tirelessly every day. My life of working hard to support my family changed completely when my mother remarried. She met a man at her part-time job, and despite her initial reluctance due to having a son, he persistently pursued her, wanting to become a family. Eventually, they got married. Our lives improved, and we moved from my mother's hometown to the city. Having lost my father to illness when I was young, I found it difficult to adjust to having a new father figure. For my mother's happiness, I knew I should get along with my stepfather. However, I was determined to make my mother happy through my hard work. And I couldn't bring myself to rely on my parents, even at 17. Understanding my complex feelings, my stepfather kept a respectful distance. He once gave me a set of fine art supplies after hearing from my mother that I loved drawing.
I hope to see your drawing someday, Fred. I'm looking forward to it.
I'm not that good yet, but I'll practice.
Thanks to my stepfather, I no longer needed to work, and my parents encouraged me to go back to school. I declined and instead focused on learning to draw and paint on my own. I wanted to show my stepfather my drawings someday, and thank him for making my mother and me happy. With that goal, I dedicated myself to drawing from morning till night. When I turned 18, I felt it was time to work outside again, so I talked to my stepfather. He suggested working at his company, which left me in a dilemma. With limited experience, I wasn't confident about working for my stepfather. However, I was inspired by his dream of creating products that bring joy to children and wanted to help make that dream a reality. I was self-taught in design principles, and I've had this vague dream of using that knowledge to develop a product. Sensing my thoughts, my stepfather recommended working at a subcontracting factory.
The skills you learn there will surely help you in the future. I'm looking forward to seeing the products you come up with.
Both Thomas and David listened in surprise as I recounted my story. Gradually, Thomas's face turned to irritation.
How did a guy who worked at his stepfather's subcontracting factory become an executive here?
There's more to the story. As I started to continue, we heard the office door creak open behind us. Thomas, who had been standing with his arms crossed and looking annoyed, now looked panicked at the sudden visitor.
Nathan, what brings you here?
It was Nathan Adrian, the president of our company.
Sorry to interrupt. I came to ask Thomas something.
Nathan shot a sharp glance at the three of us. I nodded in acknowledgement, and he turned to Thomas.
Fred informed me that your idea might be plagiarized. Could you explain?
Before finding David, I had stopped by the president's office to report the incident directly.
Yes. It seems my design coincidentally resembles David's. I did not plagiarize.
The manager probably never expected the president to come and inquire directly. Thomas stood rigidly, sweating profusely, as he pleaded his innocence.
The manager says so, but what's your view, Fred? Do you have any proof that David's idea was plagiarized?
The president's stern gaze shifted to me as he asked. Yes. The key feature of this design is the 3 differently sized parts. David wanted to create a toy that children could cherish and play with for a long time. When I glanced at David, he nodded vigorously, though still a bit confused. He measured the average hand size of children at different ages and created 3 sizes of handles to ensure they could enjoy the toy as they grew. The ability to swap these handles is the main point of the design.
Fred gave me this idea when I was struggling. We collected data from employees with young children, so it's impossible for the dimensions of these parts to be a coincidence.
David responded excitedly, while Thomas, now pale, looked down.
That's the situation. Do you have any rebuttal, Thomas?
Before the president, Thomas's earlier arrogance quickly deflated, and he admitted in a faint voice that he had plagiarized David's design.
I'm terribly sorry.
As Thomas, trembling, apologized to the president, I coldly pointed out. Thomas, you're apologizing to the wrong person. Apologize to David. Thomas glared at me angrily before reluctantly apologizing to David.
The specifics of Thomas's punishment will be formally communicated later.
As Nathan turned to leave, Thomas hurriedly tried to stop him.
What do you mean by punishment? Why am I being punished for just submitting a subordinate's design under my name?
Surprised by Thomas's aggressive outburst, the president calmly continued.
There have been reports that your behavior and conduct as a manager have been inappropriate. There are other reasons, but...
The president glanced at David, seemingly debating whether to explain in front of a new hire.
Did David snitch on me? Nathan, I assigned him work to help him grow. I was just being firm to teach Fred about the company's standards.
Hearing Thomas's misguided defense, I decided to expose everything and clenched my fist. Nathan, it's okay. I'll explain everything here. David, keep this to yourself. I pulled 3 receipts from the pocket of my work clothes. Thomas, who had been glaring at me, suddenly panicked and tried to snatch the receipts from my hand.
Why do you have those?
I found them when you made me clean your desk. This is why you didn't want me organizing the work area. These receipts documented the amounts another company paid for materials bought from ours. I had always been suspicious of Thomas's secretive behavior and was shocked and furious when I found these receipts. Thomas had been secretly taking metal from our factory and selling it to other companies, pocketing the money himself. He managed the inventory to cover up the discrepancies, as confirmed by an internal investigation. Inquiries to several companies revealed that Thomas had illicitly received nearly $30,000. These receipts were undeniable proof of Thomas's misconduct. If it were just about David's issue, we might have handled it internally. But the company can't overlook this fraud.
No.
Realizing he had been exposed by the high school dropout he looked down on, Thomas collapsed to the floor.
Until the board formally decides on your disciplinary action, you are to remain at home, Thomas.
Thomas muttered something as he gazed at the president. As we were about to leave, Thomas suddenly lashed out.
Fred, this is your fault.
He screamed, glaring at me with a furious expression.
If you hadn't come to this company, none of this would have happened. Why is a high school dropout like you an executive here? The world is wrong.
As I started to respond to his cries, the president intervened.
When I took over this company from my father, I wanted my successor to be someone who shared my big dreams. At first, I was just happy to work alongside him, but I was thrilled when he started to share those dreams. I wanted to entrust my dreams to Fred, who accepted me despite my shortcomings as a father.
What? So, the president is.
David, who was on the verge of collapsing from shock at Thomas's outburst, looked back and forth between the president and me. Thomas, also stunned by the president's words, couldn't hide his surprise. I turned to face Nathan and scratched my cheek, trying to reassure the shocked David. Dad, you're not lacking. I just wish I could have been a more worthy successor. I'm sorry for causing you and Mom so much worry. That's why I wanted to expose these wrongdoings myself." The president, his sharp gaze softening, offered words of encouragement. When Nathan, my stepfather, decided to bring me into the company to eventually take over as president, I kept avoiding the discussion, feeling overwhelmed.
I haven't been so earnestly persuasive since I wooed Mom.
Using his persistence, the president finally convinced me, and I reluctantly accepted his proposal. My mother also played a big part, urging me to start repaying their kindness now that I was grown up. Before officially becoming an executive, I wanted to see the operations firsthand, a request the president happily granted. To keep our relationship discreet, I used my mother's maiden name, Walker, at the company.
So Fred, you're the next president.
I nodded quietly to David, who asked with an excited face.
This guy, the next president.
That's right, Thomas. All your misdeeds are exposed. It's over. Having disregarded a talented subordinate and looked down on me for being a high school dropout, Thomas dropped to his knees, his shoulders slumping. Before the board could issue a formal punishment, Thomas submitted his resignation. The company used his retirement fund to repay the embezzled money and decided not to press charges. However, Thomas's wife was furious when she found out and demanded a divorce. He now lives alone, leading a lonely life. His pride shattered by the exposure of his crimes by someone he had underestimated, Thomas continued to cause trouble at every job he took and was quickly fired. Rumor has it that he's now back in his hometown, drinking heavily every day at his parents' house. As planned, I left the manufacturing department and moved to the accounting department. After Thomas left, a longtime senior member from the design department took over manufacturing. Despite being over 50, his enthusiasm brought new energy to the production floor. Meanwhile, I struggled with my new job, making frequent input errors that the accounting manager had to correct. To clear my head, I often visited the manufacturing department, exchanging ideas about new toys with David and the others.
Fred, when we tried that part you mentioned yesterday, the toy robot went wild in the inspection room.
Oh no. Let's try a different part next time. I may not have a prestigious academic background or career history, but I have big dreams. Cherishing the relationships forged through those dreams and connecting them to the next generation of children is our important role for the future.